President of Sri Lanka, His Excellency Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe, Mr. Martin Razer, Vice President, South Asia Region, the World Bank, Mr. Vish Govindasamy, Chairman of the Ceylon Chamber of Commerce, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, let me state that I am honored to address this distinguished audience. Sri Lanka is India's closest maritime neighbor and historic and civilizational partner. Through centuries, our societies and polities have maintained close links that have mutually benefited the two peoples. And this close connection is of special relevance in the contemporary context. The theme of this summit is quite apt. Sri Lanka is facing an unprecedented economic challenge, and it is only appropriate that the highly regarded Ceylon Chamber of Commerce should use its convening power to serve a good cause. When we look back at the last economic summit held virtually, one would recall the main points of the speech by the Honorable Indian Finance Minister, Srimati Nirmala Sitharaman, on 1st December 2020. Made in the COVID context, these remain valid even today from the perspective of the economic recovery of Sri Lanka. She had in particular emphasized that India's Atmanirbhar Bharat Abhiyan and the vision of self-reliant Sri Lanka are synergistic and could be used to further consolidate the economic rejuvenation efforts by both countries. She also highlighted that cooperation between India and Sri Lanka would be beneficial for a sustained economic growth that is essential for people-centric development. But where do we stand now? To understand that, it is necessary to pay attention to the precepts of Indian foreign policy and the development dimension in particular of India's foreign policy. The foundations of our engagement with Sri Lanka are based on neighborhood first, the main pillar of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's foreign policy doctrine. This is complemented by Sagar, or security and growth for all in the region. By far, the highlight of India's resolute support to Sri Lanka in 2022 has been the economic and foreign exchange assistance of about $3.8 billion. This includes the credit lines for fuel, essentials, urea, currency swaps, Asian Clearance Union deferrals, etc. On the humanitarian side, we have pressed our assets and resources for supply of medicines, kerosene, rice, milk powder, liquid medical oxygen, rapid antigen testing kits for COVID-19, Covishield vaccines, and the supply of dry rations. We have also constructively engaged with the government of Sri Lanka and other international partners in the debt restructuring process that followed the staff-level agreement with the IMF. Equitable and equal treatment of creditors and transparency are the key principles, and I am happy to note that Sri Lanka's interim policy in April 2022 had itself accorded these the central place. It is also instructive to recall that India had taken a unique position in the context of the political chaos that visited Sri Lanka in the months of May to July this year. You are all aware of our refusal to issue travel advisories. That was in line with our firm belief that principles cannot operate in isolation, and hence, when a country and its people need material assistance, all-out efforts should be explored within the limits of one's capacities. We also maintain our continued support to the people of Sri Lanka, its democracy, and economic recovery during this critical phase. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, the enhanced economic and financial engagement during the course of this year represents a fresh opportunity for both India and Sri Lanka in the post-COVID phase. And I feel we need to build on what we already have. As on date and according to available data, India is Sri Lanka's largest trading partner with an overall bilateral merchandise trade of $5.545 billion in calendar year 2021. India's overall development assistance of $5 billion has had a significant impact on various sectors in Sri Lanka, such as housing, education, health, industrial development, livelihood support, transport, etc. Further, India is one of the largest contributors of FDI to Sri Lanka, with a cumulative of $2.2 billion so far. In recent years, India has continued to be the first responder in Sri Lanka, as witnessed during the MT New Diamond and MV Express Pearl disasters in 2020 and 2021. I am given to understand that going forward, the Indian side, by which I include both the government and the private sector, is determined to enhance this ongoing cooperation. For instance, India is focusing on an investment-led support, especially in petroleum products and retail, tourism and hotels, manufacturing, real estate, telecommunications, banking and financial services. Most recently, Indian investment has come in the port sector with $650 to $700 million for the West Container Terminal project by the Adani Group in partnership with Sri Lanka private and public sector, formally kicking off in November 2022. There is some more in the pipeline in the areas of renewable energy, power, LNG, manufacturing, etc. I also feel that the present juncture provides an opportunity to re-establish connectivity through air links and ferry services, connecting financial markets, the interconnection of the electricity grids, using Indian currency for trade, and securing energy supplies. In this context, I would like to specially emphasize the imperative of cooperation in the context of the fight against the deleterious impact of climate change. Without doubt, our two countries have a shared interest in this important sphere. The two governments are also committed to a greener and cleaner future. Over the last decade, India has made rapid strides in renewable energy products and processes, which we are ready and willing to share with Sri Lanka. We can work on the existing basis of the $100 million credit line for solar projects and encourage private sector investments in the wind sector, which could give a boost to energy exports from Sri Lanka to India. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, generally speaking, the pathway towards an economic recovery starts with the budget, which usually presents an opportunity for any country. While I have no specific comments on the direction of the budget, suffice it to state that Sri Lanka possesses the potential to emerge as a stronger and more resilient economy in the coming years. Sri Lanka's location has significance so far as maritime security is concerned, and it is an important player in the Indian Ocean Region Association and BIMSTEC. It is in Sri Lanka's interest to ensure freedom of navigation, safeguard of sea lanes, and have a rule-based international order. The recent Budget 2023 envisions Sri Lanka as a developed country by 2048. Similarly, India, in its Budget 2022, presented a roadmap for the economy for the next 25 years, our Amrit Kal, with India looking to be a global economic powerhouse by its 100th year of independence in 2047. Thus, the visions of India and Sri Lanka are complementary and could be directed towards the mutual benefit of both countries. To summarize briefly, in the current context, I feel that Sri Lanka could take a fresh look at three main dimensions of its economic recovery, namely A. Revitalizing and rationalizing the existing value chains, B. Ensuring that the service sector is strengthened, and C. Reviving tourism. In all of these, ample opportunity exists to leverage the advantage of proximity with India, the world's third largest economy in PPP terms. I would be remiss if I did not flag the important component of capacity building and human resources development cooperation between the two sides of the Park Straits. When I consider the potential available in the current context, my thoughts veer towards the spheres of higher education, training to civil servants, skill development, cooperation in agriculture, dairy, and aquaculture, as well as startups. While the existing mechanisms, like the programs under the ITEC and various scholarships, are making substantial progress, perhaps the time is opportune now to step up the new engagements in these spheres. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, let me now turn to some important lessons of the past. As you are aware, India had to knock on the IMF's doors in the early 90s because of persistently high levels of fiscal deficit and current account deficit, which led to a balance of payments crisis. This, along with a sizable public debt, both domestic and external, and an overvalued rupee, eroded India's international competitiveness, and we were left with foreign exchange reserves to cover only 2 weeks' worth of imports. And similar to the present COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine crisis, the then Gulf crisis and breakup of the Soviet Union adversely affected the domestic fiscal scenario. The standby facility we sought was approved by the IMF on October 31, 1991. The arrangement became an opportunity for both the government and the Reserve Bank of India to embark upon a series of homegrown reforms pertaining to the macroeconomic and financial sectors. There was significant action in the sphere of trade liberalization, tax reforms, and capital reforms in respect to ease of foreign capital inflows. It is also important to emphasize that there was political consensus for these measures. Now fast forward to the present. According to the latest IMF figures, India's GDP at current prices reached $3.5 trillion US, and we are now the 5th largest economy in the world. India's forex reserves jumped from around $5 billion in 1991 to $533 billion today. Recent structural reforms like the GST, the Goods and Services Tax, Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, PM Gati Shakti, the new logistics policy, the production-linked incentive scheme, the digitalization program, the National Infrastructure Pipeline, the Asset Monetization Initiative, etc., have created new avenues for economic growth in the coming years. Most importantly, a slew of reforms aimed towards ease of doing business in India have also been launched in the past few years, making India an attractive investment destination amongst foreign investors. Firstly, India's archaic labor laws were rationalized and 4 labor codes were introduced. Secondly, a land pool of over 400,000 hectares was identified and developed to attract foreign companies. These 2 reforms alone have reduced the transaction cost of doing business in India and helped India attract almost double the FDI it used to attract up to 2014. In addition, initiatives like Startup India, Digital India, the Swachh Bharat Mission, the Clean India Campaign, Jan Dhan Yojana, Unified Payment Interface, and other socio-economic programs have transformed the urban and rural landscape to propel the country to a new upgraded level of economic existence. We are ready and willing to collaborate with Sri Lanka in these spheres. While we do so, we should be conscious of the challenging and often volatile global situation, especially the geopolitical and economic dimensions, which have a direct bearing on the prospects for both India and Sri Lanka. In conclusion, let me state that India will continue to stand with the people of Sri Lanka in their process of economic recovery and efforts at achieving food and energy security in complete solidarity as a democratic partner which respects diversity as the pathway to growth and prosperity. Thank you very much.